Chip story. We're going to start in 1945. None of you were, or maybe your parents also were not born. My parents, I think one of them was born. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start there. 1945. What happened in 1945? World War II. Well, it's just coming to the tail end. So the purpose of this is kind of give you a historical perspective of where we were, where this revolution really started, where you are right now. And we are going to connect the dot to where we are going to go in future. That's all we are going to try to do. And specifically, we are, as Indians, we are kind of right in the middle of it right now. You know, all the political environment and everything, right? Because we are all trying really hard to make progress here. And the intent of this is to motivate you to do something about it. Hopefully you will get into this space and make a contribution, and hopefully at that time you'll remember when you'll make it big and things like that, right? So the World War II happening 1945, coming to the tail end, right? And the World War was mainly like it's called typhoon of steel. Just bomb the hell out of each other. That's it. That's all they were doing. They had nothing else to do. Take a tank and bomb the enemy. That's it. Which is what is going on right now in the world anyway. So that part hasn't changed much. But that it was more of just bombard each other. There was no intelligence involved. That's all I'm trying to say. You send humans with a tank and you bombard the other side. That's all they were doing. You take a plane, you load it up and you dump garbage onto other people. That's all you're doing. And you're damaging everything that comes in the way. So pretty much that's what was going on. And now I'm going to show you few people who are going to be the main actors in this story. And there are many, many actors in this whole story. So I just want you to be cognizant of their contributions to where we are. Because I always feel, we are thankful to our ancestors, right? So these are the people we have to be thankful about. At that time, they were doing something, but the impact of that is, we are seeing it now, right? So Akio Morita, he was in Japan, and everybody knows, right? World War II, Japan was involved. What happened to Japan? 1945, about few days from now. 6th August 1945, Hiroshima, right? 9th August 1945, as if one was not enough. Nagasaki, they dropped the bombs, atomic bombs. And desperate times, right? So Akio, I'll not reveal who these people are, but the storyline, it will come up later on. So Akio was caught in between over there. And all of them were really trying to just survive. Well, all this stuff is happening because all this stuff is happening in the world, and you're imagine, right? You're sitting in a hostel or you're sitting in your home, and you have no control over the situation. You're just trying to survive. He was trying to do that. And hunger was a desperate measure. Okay, at that time it was, you just had to do something to feed yourself. That's what they were all trying to figure out at that time. Akio was trying to figure out, and his brothers. Have you heard the word kamikaze? So they would sign up. They signed up for being a kamikaze pilot. You know what kamikaze pilot is? You take a plane and you take the whole plane and you dump yourself, and you die. That's what, so that you can feed the family. So what happened is, as the World War was ending, interesting story about Akio is he avoided going to the emperor's address. Emperor's address, because what happens is they're losing, right? So the emperor, they're worried that they're going to say mass suicide. Chalo, sab log mar jate. He didn't want to do that. So he kind of said, nahi, main to nahi jaunga. Tujhe karna hai, tu kar le suicide, right? So that's kind of, I'm kind of dramatizing the whole situation. I'm sure they spoke in Japanese. They didn't speak in Hindi at that time. But that's what Akio was doing, right? He just wanted to kind of get out of that situation. So Akio, the next person in our story is Maurice Chang. We don't know who Maurice Chang is. Maurice Chang is yet another character in China. So he was again, he was on the receiving side of the Japanese people. Akio was Japanese and this guy is Chinese. But the Japanese army was invading China. and they were harassing them left and right, and they're bombing them out. So he was trying to kind of run away from this army. So he went to Hong Kong, which was a British colony, and he was going back and forth, and he was just trying to avoid getting out of the war. Purpose was to survive, to stay alive. That's it. So Maurice Chang was doing that, and the key point I'm trying to make is he was Chinese, and he ran away from China to Hong Kong, back to China. All that good stuff was happening. Okay, are you with me? You'll remember these two names. What was the first name? Akio. The second one is Maurice Chang. Okay, all right. The third character in our story is Andy Grove, or he's called Andras Grof. He was from Budapest, Hungary, and he was Jew. That the Jews were treated like second-class citizens, complete second-class citizens. So whenever it was convenient, they were utilized. So whenever basically the Russian army was coming in and they were invading, right? So then the Nazi people said, "नहीं, हम लोग भाई भाई, चलो हम लोग साथ fight करते हैं." So they would take them to the fights, but as soon as the fight was over, then they wanted to kill them. Literally, that was going on. Now the Russian army actually came in. They liberated so-called, Hungary from the Nazi region at that time. So these people thought that, oh, cool, now we are free, right? But that wasn't the case. The Russian army was, the history tells it was actually a lot worse. And again, what was he trying to do? Just survive. That's it. Andy Grove. And 1945, World War II was over. Why are people so afraid of the wars? Because nothing is reasonable. People keep scaring you. There is World War III going to happen. People are scared because when the war happens, no one is reasonable. Correct? That's why we should be scared. Because what do you have to do? If World War III happens tomorrow, what will you be doing? I just want to survive. That's all you will be doing. Okay, I'll eat my food, I'll stay away, and then I want to survive. That's all these people were doing. Super sharp. I mean, there is one set of people who want to go fight it out and kill themselves, whatever, of course, for protecting the nation. But stuff like that when happens, there is just no right or wrong at that point. So why am I telling you about World War? Where is all this stuff going, right? So that's where it comes next. Statistics of World War II, which you will be very shocked. The first statistic is only 20% of the American bombs. 20%, If you dropped 100 bombs, only 20%, they came somewhere close to 1,000 feet. Can you imagine that? 1,000 feet of the target. I hope you appreciate the number. 1,000 feet is, I mean, you try to bomb some place, which is a military installation, and you are actually hitting something else, completely something else. So that was the main problem at that time. The second one is basically the more accuracy that you wanted, then you had to do more calculations. You had to do calculations. And at that time, it was all mechanical, gear-based computation. So it's like, if I'm dropping a bomb, then I would change some mechanical things, and I would align things, compensate for this effect and all that effect. And then it was all mechanical. That's what was going on. Not accurate at all. Okay. So the first revolution that happened was they started using vacuum tubes. And I'm going to tell you what that is. That's probably, you don't know what that means. Instead of mechanical computers, which are like, oh, change this, and all this stuff is while you're in the plane, you're trying to bomb the place, wind speed is this much, change this, change that, and then they'll drop a bomb, and then it will be 20% accuracy. That's what was going on. So then there were, actually they use humans as calculators. There used to be like a bank of people who would be just doing computations. They'll have logarithm sheets and things like that, and they'll be simply doing the calculations. What should be the equation, what should be the target, and you line it up here so it will drop here, something like that. So the vacuum tube came in, and things were better because now the humans are not involved. So now it's all done using vacuum tubes. So vacuum tubes. So none of you know what a vacuum tube is. They look like this. So these are all like, you may think that these are small, but they're not. So I have one vacuum tube I got for you, just to show you. And I love this vacuum tube. So this is the way it looks like. Okay, it's a piece of glass, and there is a whole bunch of. It's a simple switch, 1 or a 0. The action is happening here. I'll keep it here for you to, so that you can tell your grandchildren that you touched a vacuum tube. So this vacuum tube, you can imagine, right? I mean, how big the whole computer is for these calculations, right? So if you look at the way the vacuum tube works, right? If the vacuum tube is on, it would light up, and when it's off, it would be, there would not be any. So basically, 1 is equal to tube is on, and 0 is equal to tube is off. Okay. So what used to happen was all these vacuum tubes, once they're lit up, what will come? If you put candles वगैरह, क्या आ जाते हैं? मच्छर वच्छर सब लोग आ जाते हैं. तो इसमें भी bugs आते थे. Bugs, literally bugs, like they're all flying around and they'll come over there. All right. So I mean, the computer scientists use this word, but actually it came from here. We have to debug. Literally, you had to go in and with a thing and you have to debug the whole computer. Okay. So keyword, the debug word came from here. Although they claim it, many times bugs are called a feature, but okay. So this is what the beginning of a binary computing was. Okay, the vacuum tube is on and off, and then each tube looks like this big, yeah, big. You can imagine now, right, where it's going, where I'm going with this. So this is the ENIAC, artillery trajectory computer, which was there in US. So I found a picture of it, and these are all the things which are their tubes. You can see how big that computer is, and there were 18,000 vacuum tubes. Okay, and we used to call it valves. My father used to call it valve gela re tuja, which means that you have to go in and you have to take out one of the valves, buy one, and you have to replace it, and then the radio starts working. So 18,000 vacuum tubes, and one tube would die in every 2 days. So statistically, they would die. And the whole thing was like a big room. I think it used to consume some few kilowatts. And all it is doing is some calculator function, which you already have in your thing, and as simple as that. So it was used for all the niche applications like code breaking and things like that. For a real-time use, this was not really favorable, right? Like imagine in actual war situation, you have vacuum tubes in a plane and then the whole checking and all of them are dying, right? So imagine that situation, right? So then there was a drive, what was the motivation? Motivation was to just find a switch that's manageable and predictable. That was the motivation of all these people. Akio was one of the visionaries. And वो सोच रहा था ये, how do I make this, automatic? That was going on in his brain at that time. So heat-seeking missiles. That's what. So interesting story out of this is all these inventions are happening because we are trying to kill each other. Seriously speaking, right? I mean, fortunately, we are able to use it for positive things. Although I don't know all the social media, is it helping or not? But that's where this whole thing is going. Is we are just trying to kill each other, annihilate each other. Comes the next hero of our story, William Shockley. Story about Shockley is he's born in London. I don't think you know him, but I'll tell you about him. And he grew up, and everybody is familiar with those the pictures that I think you have seen them somewhere, right? The band level diagram, band bending, right? So it started with this guy, right? I mean, I'm treating him like my friend, but I mean, he's like guru, right? So he was born in London, and he grew up in Palo Alto, which is today's Silicon Valley. And he did his he studied at Caltech, and then he did his PhD at MIT, and then he was at Bell Labs. That was the common destination. Shockley was a total obnoxious person. He was so arrogant that he would just piss off everybody who's around him constantly. So people had really hard time working with him, Shockley. And he was like a outstanding theoretical physicist. What does a theoretical physicist mean? You dream up things, you imagine, and he was great at imagination. So he came up with this he was looking at semiconductors, and the semiconductors would conduct only when you do something with them, like you dope them with the impurities, things like that. They would start conducting, right? So he kind of said, "Ki, how do I put out a theory for all this stuff, right?" So he came up with this theory that I will apply a large voltage and I'll do this and I'll do this, and he devised an experiment, and he was happy that first he cooked up the theory in his head. Imagine this. It's not most of us, we see something and then we cook up the theory. He came up with the theory first in his head, and he said, nahi, aise hona chahiye. Electron idhar se udhar bhagega, ye karega, wo karega. And he was thinking about all those things, and he dreamt up everything. And he used to write down all the theory, everything. And then he was doing an experiment. The experiment failed. It didn't work. So what happened was probably the measurement inaccuracy. Okay, whatever. Basically, he didn't see that the semiconductor conducting current. What were we trying to do? That cock business, right? You change something and the current changes. He was trying to do the same thing. He was applying a large voltage to change the current, and he couldn't measure the change in the current. So interesting thing about him, he is, we should not talk about, but then that's what makes us interesting, right? He was very racist person, and he had, eugenic views. What that means is he was very, very much into race, like we are superiors type of thing, and my genes have to propagate further. Only good genes have to propagate further. But all that stuff was in his head, right? It's okay. उस मामले में हम कुछ नहीं किया. हमें खाली transistor से लेन देन है, right? What he did. So that's a story about Shockley. Brilliant person, but he just couldn't work with other people. And there come John Bardeen and Walter Brattain, these two people. These are, sweetest people there, okay? They are Shockley's colleagues in Bell Labs, and they basically said, okay, they were experimentalists, so they would do things. Basically what they did was they devised the experiment, and so Bardeen was from Princeton, scientist from Princeton, and interesting thing about John Bardeen is the only person in the world who has got 2 Nobel Prizes. Can you imagine that? 2 Nobel Prizes in physics. Okay, so cool guy. Okay, all right. And then Brattain, both of them were working. They had an interesting background, but they were polar opposites of our hero Shockley. Okay, all right. So they came up with an experiment that looked like this. Okay, so what they said is that, oh, let's do this, right? So they cooked this experiment up, and the thing looked actually like this. Okay, so this is the first transistor that they manufactured, and this was in 1947, and it was all based on Shockley's theory. So Shockley came up with the theory, and then these guys just said, okay, let me try this. So what you see here is there is a germanium, is a slab of germanium, right? You see that? And then there is, on one side there is emitter, the other side is a collector, lead. And then they were just seeing the current flowing from one to another. And they were able to control the base region. That's all there is to it, okay? So same thing, this is the way it was, it looked like. And so they developed this whole thing, and they named it as a transistor, because it's transmitter and resistor, because you're changing the resistor, so they called it transistor. Now, can you imagine Shockley's reaction? What do you think happened? Close. He was pissed. He was like extremely unhappy. I mean, it was his baby, his theory, but somebody else proved it, right? So, extremely unhappy person. And then what he did was, he actually, during Christmas time, he put himself checked him in a hotel in Chicago. And he just didn't come out of the room. And he said, "Isse bhi behtar kuch karna hai mujhe." Matlab, his first invention, So interesting story. And he actually came up with yet another device, which is what we use as an NPN device, or like whatever we talked about, right? So exciting background story. That NPN sandwich that we talk about, right? That's what he came up during that Christmas time when he locked himself up in a room. Okay, so here 3 of them are there. If you go and look up on Google, you will not find a picture of Bardeen and Brattain together. You will not find one, single one. You will always find three of them together. Okay, so that was the deal. Bell Labs put their foot down, saying that नहीं तीनों का picture साथ में ही आना चाहिए, सब कुछ इनका साथ में ही करना है. A very smart manager, whoever was there. He made sure that बाबा तुझे भी credit, सबको credit, और Bell Labs का नाम हो गया उसमें. Otherwise, what would have happened? It would have been all. Anyway, there was an ugly fight and this and that and everything, right? So, but Bardeen and Britain were not bothered. वो अपना काम कर रहे थे, उनको experiments करना था. They were just enjoying whatever they. But Shockley was, he was always unhappy, and of course that unhappiness was the cause of, kind of whatever he did, right? So they were given Nobel Prize in Physics, 1956, and Bardeen had gotten Nobel Prize before this. Okay, but let's not get there. Now comes the next hero of our story, Jack Kilby. Okay, so the story here is 1958. So whatever these guys were doing, right? Shockley, Britain, and Bardeen, they kept doing their experiments. So Shockley wanted to be rich and famous also. He didn't want to just do inventions. He just wanted to make money. Okay, so he kind of went after this idea, and then Bell Labs actually licensed the transistor for $25,000 at that time. Licensed the transistor concept. Even though these guys invented it, of course the company owns the patent. So then, so he took the license, and the biggest challenge was, how do you make this transistor practical and usable, something you can use. So that was the biggest challenge. In case of the valves, right? If you replace the valve with a transistor, then there's a whole bunch of wires all over the place. That was the jungle, and that was yet another can of worms, literally can of worms that it used to look like, that they couldn't fix. So Jack Kilby entered this. An interesting story about him is July of 1958. This is about 10 years later, after the transistor was, everybody was working on how do you make this transistor usable. So he joined Texas Instruments. He was somewhere else, and he didn't have any vacation. Generally, when you join a company, immediately वो vacation वगैरह नहीं देते. तो 4th of July का weekend को उसको vacation नहीं मिला, तो तू काम करते रहे बस. तो Jack Kilby went to the lab, and he had 2 weeks. Generally in US, when the vacation comes in, they give you, हाँ बाबा सब लोग पूरा factory बंद कर देंगे, आप घर पे जाके मजा करो. So they shut down the whole factory. वैसे ही कुछ हुआ रहेगा. So he didn't have vacation. So what to do? So he just went to the lab, and he had the whole lab to himself, and he just was tinkering around. So he came up with the idea at that time. The idea was, can I basically put multiple devices, okay, on one thing, right? Because vacuum tubes were separate, transistors were separate, and you had to wire it. So he was constantly thinking about this, and he came up with this idea that let's take multiple components, capacitors, resistors, transistors, everything, and put them on the same substrate, same chip. Okay, so or whatever it is, right? So these were like mesas, meaning one transistor, second transistor, third transistor, resistor, all those things. He was putting it on some substrate, and then he was putting. You can see this is the first integrated circuit. What you are seeing in the picture is the first ever integrated circuit. So these structures he used, and when the people came back after 2 weeks of vacation, our man has already invented integrated circuit. Okay, Jack Kilby. Amazing, isn't it? I mean, these guys, they were young at that time. The picture looks very old. And I have met him in person, Jack Kilby. And he's the sweetest person. He's so accessible to ordinary person like me. And I still have that impact of like awestruck. It's like meeting Amitabh Bachchan, right? Everybody knows who Amitabh Bachchan is. Okay, so it's almost like that, although I haven't met him, but I was just starstruck in front of him. But he was so, I mean, the only word that comes to mind is sweet, the way he talked and the way, he was so humble, when he was talking. The guy has done something revolutionary for the whole world, and, he was so, I don't have words. I mean, when I tear up when I think about that particular incident, right? So, then basically Jack Kilby did this, and about 2 years ago, right, there is a backstory. So Shockley was really good at finding good people. He had a knack for people. So all these people, they were working with Shockley, still our previous guy. So he started a company, and so these people, they were very unhappy with the way Shockley was dealing with them, right? So extremely toxic environment inside the company. So one day, they all 8 of them decided to leave. The reason I'm showing you this picture, it's all of them, all these people have done something or the other, and they're very well known, but we don't know them. So I just wanted to bring that out for you. Okay. So Gordon Moore, have you ever heard about Moore's law? It's going to come into my story. Okay. Then have you heard about Kleiner and Perkins? Anyone? Kleiner and Perkins? No. Okay. It's okay. It's one of the probably the first venture capitalist firm in the Bay Area, where the Silicon Valley, the words, it started there. Bob Noyce, he was another competing person to make this, the chip business happen. All right. So interestingly, Jack Kilby named it as integrated circuit. This device. So we call IC integrated circuit, and they called it a chip. You know why it's called chip? We all are used to the word chip, but it has nothing to do with potato chip. Do you know why it's called a chip from then, 1948? Because it was a broken piece, a chip of silicon or chip of germanium. And that's where the word chip came from. Okay, it has nothing to do with the other chips. So these are what we call chips, is actually the word came from what Jack Kilby was thinking about it. Okay, so so the reason I'm showing you this picture is all these guys, they started a company called Fairchild Semiconductor. One person out of the whole thing who doesn't get due credit. I like those because they are my kind of, what do you call them? Unsung hero. Perfect. Ayush, you the man. Okay. So one unsung hero in this whole thing is the person whose name is in, he's right next to the table lamp. He's my hero. This person. Can you see next to the table lamp? Not the last person, but Gene Horney. He's the second one from the right side. Second one from right side. Okay. Remember him, and his name is Gene. Okay. So the Gene, what he did was something amazing, right? At that time. See, earlier what they were doing, what Jack Kilby was doing was they were taking pieces and they're putting it together, put the wires. So Gene was thinking, how do I make it a planar process? Right? Do you understand what a planar process means? Planar means you take one piece of silicon or one piece of substrate and you develop everything on that substrate. Okay? So everything is on the same substrate. So I'm not taking these islands of different devices and I'm connecting them, putting a glue under it, this kind of thing. So he was the one, Gene was the one who actually came up with that idea. And it's called planar process. Planar process means you take one substrate, you develop every piece on top of that substrate, and then Bob Noyce was the next person who took it to the next level, who took his idea, and he said, "ये साला wire का बहुत ही लफड़ा है, तो why don't we paint metal or deposit metal?" Correct? I mean, look how simple the ideas were at that time. Was remove wire, just paint karte hai uske upar wire, or we do some kind of deposition and we will do this thing. And there the next thing, rest of the story next week. Okay, so the thing is, now here we have same substrate, multiple devices, and here you have metal connections. Okay, but what was the negative? It was 50 times more expensive to produce at that time. All right, thank you so much.